All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Rohan Sanyal. I am a data management specialist and applications engineer here at Design Point. Let me actually go ahead and share my screen really quick. All right. So again, my name is Rohan Sanyal. I'm a data management specialist and applications engineer here at Design Point. Um, and my specialty here and what I work on almost every day is PDM. A lot of you might know or recognize me from maybe a support call I've had with you or anything like that. But nonetheless, I hope you guys enjoy this presentation, and we're going to get started. So what is my presentation about? What is it all going to be taken care of? Essentially, what it is how to handle engineering changes inside of PDM. The idea here, or the cool title I came up with, is be the change you want to see in your vault. So I took inspiration from Gandhi and then just put it straight into PDM. So in any case, let's actually go ahead and get started with what we are going to talk about. So submitting ECRs. So this might be a very common practice in your organization, you know, when you have engineering drawings and parts and assemblies, or just any sort of project in general, and you have a time where you need to make a change to it, it needs to be a revision or anything like that. So it sort of begs the question, how do you handle those engineering change requests? How do you handle tracking those changes? How do you handle making sure the right people can see the right things? A lot of that can be handled through PDM, and perhaps a lot of you who do have PDM have like a workflow that details how the engineering changes are handled or anything like that. So the idea here is we're going to talk about a way that I've actually implemented an engineering change process in an existing PDM environment, and perhaps you'll find some tidbits of information or something that could benefit you, and you think, this might actually not be a bad idea to try it out this way. So today's roadmap is going to look a little something like this. We're going to be talking about submitting ECRs, approving those engineering changes, and then tracking those changes. So this is going to be our roadmap. Now, the way I'm going to handle the actual engineering change is basically we're going to start out with an ECR, which is an engineering change request. And in that regard, we're going to look at the actual engineering change request and see, is it worth our time to actually make the change or anything? And once that is approved, then it can become an ECN, and the changes can actually be applied to the part or assembly or what have you for that. All right. So we're going to start off first with the change form request. Let's actually talk about, getting that started. So let me show you. I'm going to be switching back and forth here. So you guys can see my screen here. And what we're actually going to do is we're going to log into my PDM Vault. So I'm going to go to my MIP 2021 Vault here. I'm going to log in as the admin. All right. Now, logging into PDM, this should be fairly familiar to most of you, those who have PDM. For those who aren't familiar, this is essentially just PDM is a lot like a Windows network drive that is more robust, a good way to collaborate with all your colleagues and everything and show all that information and work on files and projects together. And there's a lot more functionality here as well. Now, why we're in this vault in particular is I want to talk a little bit about a miter saw assembly that we have here. So let's actually go to my engineering folder. Let's go to miter saw, the assembly one that I have here. And here we have my miter saw assembly. So what we're going to do is let's actually take a look at the actual top level assembly. So this is the assembly in question. All right. We have a lot of different parts here and everything. All the subcomponents are all inside this folder. And what I want you to take notice of is the fact that they're all in a state called approved, right? This is a console log, don't worry about that. But in any case, this assembly is in the approved state. Okay, perfect. So what I'm actually going to do is I want to begin a change on this assembly because I want to make a change to a specific component, maybe changing the color of one of these components. So the way I'm going to get that started is first, I'm going to take this assembly and I'm going to right click the assembly, change state, and select the option to say send for change. All right. In doing so, again, PDM will take all the different references here and understand that, okay, these references or subcomponents of the assembly will be brought over. Brilliant. So I'm going to say sending would like to change the color of one of the subcomponents. For expediency's sake, that's essentially what I'm going to do here. But the idea, the fundamentals of how this works is still going to be the same. So I'm going to hit OK. It's going to go ahead and change state on all the files. And you'll notice that they're all in a state called ECR initiated. Perfect. This is the first step in the process. Now, this may not look that unfamiliar to most of you because maybe your engine changes look exactly like this. You send it for a change in that regard. But something I've noticed in a lot of different implementations that I've done, especially when it comes to engineering changes, there's usually a document that follows along with the process. This document will detail what the change is, potentially some implications on like other departments, who the approvers are, things like that. So it's like an ECR form, right? That's what I'm going to show you today. Now, it's not exactly going to be like a Word document or anything like that. Instead, we're going to use another tool in our PDM toolbox to actually satisfy the need for that form. Let's take a look. I'm actually going to go back to my engineering change here, or the root of my vault. And what we're going to do is we're going to use a PDM template to create my engineering change form. So I'm going to right click, new, and I'm going to see I have an option here for a PDM template called ECR. In doing so, I brought in basically a data card that's acting as the form for my template. In this data card, you'll see I have some options for the description of change, the engineering implications, the purchasing implications, and the sales and marketing implications. Now, the way this form looks can be completely configurable. I just set it up in this way because of certain things that I've pulled from different implementations, and a lot of the same questions kept coming up, so I kept those in here. But the thing to keep in mind is you can modify this to say, like, okay, are there other implications that you need when you start an ECR? Are there other things that need to be addressed when beginning an ECR? That we can add here. So in here, I'm going to be very simple, and I'll just simply say the description of change is going to be would like to change the color of the saw in the in the assembly. The engineering implications could be, applying new components to assembly. And for purchasing, I don't know this just yet, so I'll just put in NA for now. And here, not sure as yet, I'll put NA for now. But that doesn't mean we can't change that later, which we absolutely can. I can also add some other comments to say, like, maybe something that couldn't easily be described here, or perhaps some details about who the customer could be, or for what reason we're actually making the change to outside of the description of change. You have that option. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. All right. So at face value, nothing has changed here. Nothing in my environment has changed. Cool. All right. So let's actually go inside my ECRs folder. And would you look at that? We have a new ECR folder here. I did a couple more in the background, took away a couple, but we have ECR-0006. Let me actually open it. Inside that ECR-006, we have a folder for ECR document and another subfolder for reference documentation. Okay, let's actually go inside the ECR document folder. What we should see is a virtual document that has been created as a result of me running that template. So if I click that virtual document and go to the data card, you'll see we have a data card about who the ECR was submitted by, the ECR submitted date, the ECO information, which is what I put in here, and basically some information about it. So that begs the question, What is a virtual document? Well, the idea is that it's sort of a fake file, but can utilize all the different functions of PDM in one shot. So in this regard, what we can do is we can apply a bill of materials to it. We can apply references to it. And that's exactly what we're going to do here. This virtual document is going to act like our engineering change form that we're going to monitor as the assembly changes, right? So what we're going to do is you'll notice that this form is still checked out. All right, perfect. There's a good reason for that. And there's a reason why I kept it that way. Because now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add that miter saw assembly as a reference to this virtual document. So let's do that. I'm going to go back to MIP 2021 here, go back to my engineering files, miter saw assembly 1. And I'm going to find the top level assembly here. I'm going to right click, copy, go back to that ECR form here. And then with the ECR form still checked out, that's a crucial point, we're going to utilize something called paste as reference. So I'm going to right click, paste as reference. What we're actually going to do here is I'll go ahead and hit OK. And I'm going to then check in the virtual document. So I'm going to right click, check in. And what you'll see is that the reference now, since I've attached that miter saw assembly as a reference to the virtual document, that virtual document is now almost like a bucket holding the information of that specific file while consolidating all of the engineering change implications in one singular way. So I'm going to go ahead and say attached miter saw to ECR form. Perfect. That's it. Brilliant. So what does this accomplish for me? Let's actually go to the bill of materials. You'll see that this ECR form now inherited the bill of materials for that miter saw assembly. All right. And if I were to, excuse me, if I were to, let's say, go to this miter saw assembly, browse to it, and let's say I go to the where used tab, I can see all ECRs that have ever been done on this miter saw assembly. So I can see that 2 of them have been completed. It's currently an ECR initiated, and the latest ECR is ECR 0006, which is an ECR initiated. And if I wanted to know what that engineering change was from this miter saw assembly, all I'd have to do is, again, from the contains, or sorry, the where used tab, right click and browse to. Takes me directly to that virtual document, and I can see the information about the engineering change. So this is another way to handle consolidating all of the information about the engineering change into a virtual document. Now, you're not limited to just putting in information about the CAD assembly or the CAD files to this virtual document. You can attach as reference literally anything if you want to. It could be a PDF, could be a specification document, it could be a Word document, any Microsoft Office file, totally up to you. Right? So let's go back to my presentation. So what we're doing here is we're talking about submitting ECRs. So with the PDM ECR or ECO automation, we're using automated PDM templates. That's exactly how I created that folder structure. And that's exactly how I created that virtual document. That virtual document, as you saw, it gave it a new number. I never had to type in ECR-0006. PDM using the serial number mechanism, which is available in PDM Professional, that's how I'm able to do all of this. We're going to use workflows to manage how the notifications are handled, the approvals, document controls, and most importantly, data cards to help track and record the metadata of the engineering change in this environment. So now we're going to go to the ECR approval. So what happens here? So as I mentioned before, we are simply going to create this ECR. The actual CAD files are not going to be worked on. They're not going to be changed up until the ECR is actually approved. That's what we're going to do. So let's go ahead here. And in here, now we're going to see another benefit of using virtual documents in this regard. You'll notice the virtual document and the CAD files are all in the same state, ECR initiated. So how does that benefit us? Let me show you. We're currently in ECR initiated. I'm going to right click this file and I'm going to select change state and say send for approval. So it's going to bring the miter saw assembly along with it, along with all of the subcomponents right there. So the approval is actually happening here where it's seeing all those components and everything like that, and it's bringing it all in one shot. I don't have to choose the assembly. All I have to worry about as a user in this environment is the virtual document, AKA the engineering change form. So I'm going to say, would like to make aesthetic changes to the assembly, and Mr. Greenwald what do you think? So I'm going to notify C. Greenwald here. If you've taken any PDM admin trainings with me, you'll probably recognize who this is. So in any case, we're going to go ahead and notify C. Greenwald, because again, as part of PDM Professional, even with PDM Standard, you can notify people, but the benefit with Professional is the notifications can then be emails instead of just simply being pop-ups when you're logged into PDM. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. So now the engineering change request is in ECR pending approval. If I were to go to the Contains tab, you'll see that not only that, all the subcomponents are also in ECR pending approval. So the paste as reference is bringing along those files for the ride to get this to work, right? So now that that's approved, right, we're going to take a look. We're going to go back to our PowerPoint here and talk about the engineering change approvals. So basically what's going to happen is without the engineering change approvals or without this automation or anything, the things to think about, how are approvals handled for these kinds of changes? How long does that approval take? If you're not using notifications or anything like that, is it a sneaker network where you have to go to their office? Has an engineering change ever been lost or off track? Maybe it pushed back a deadline as a result of that. And how would you control the permissions to see who can actually modify them and who can change them or rather approve them, right? All of this stuff can be handled in the same place using this system here. So we're going to go back here. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to log in as C. Greenwald. So I'm going to log out as an admin. And I'm going to log back in as C. Greenwald. Oh, I logged in automatically. Whoops. Probably should stop that. Log in. IP 2021. C. Greenwald. I believe that's the. Oh. There you go. So now you'll see I'm logged in as C. Greenwald. So I was basically notified about the fact that I needed to have this happen, right? So I'm going to go ahead and go to my ECRs, ECR 0006, ECR document. So this is the ECR in question. We want to make a change the color of the saw in the assembly. All right, they're applying new components. Fair enough. All right, that looks pretty good to me. So what I'm going to do is I'll say, yeah, I'll approve this as C. Greenwald. I'm going to change state and say ECR approved. And we're going to simply say, looks good to me. And I'll notify our engineer, B. Corbett, for applying those changes or anything like that. So I'll go ahead and hit OK here. Now you'll see that the ECR submitted by was by originally the admin, the ECR approved by or ECR approved date has also been by C, the initial C Greenwald has brought that in as well. So it's tracking A, who submitted the ECR, B, who approved the engineering change, and now you can begin tracking those changes and going forward with that as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead back to the actual change. So we'll pretend that like this is actually in ECN in progress. It is now being worked on, that it's actually being changed. So I'm actually going to go ahead and log out of C Greenwald, and we'll act like we're now going to be B Corbett. So I'm going to go ahead and log into MIP 2021, B Corbett, and we'll log in. Oh, just to let you guys know, I'll be sure to leave 10 minutes at the end to address any questions or comments at all. Absolutely, no worries about that. So as B Corbett, I'm gonna go log in and say like, okay, it looks like this engineering change has been approved by C Greenwald. Brilliant. That means I can start working on it. Awesome. So let me go to the contains tab to see what I'm going to be working on, the miter saw assembly. All right, let me actually open it up in SOLIDWORKS. So all I had to do again from PDM, or as the engineer required for this, is simply open it up in SOLIDWORKS. I am aware it's using a lot, that's not a problem. No, that's good. And I'm only going to check out the top level assembly. Sure. All right. Now there's going to be a rebuild error here. Don't worry about it. It's just a main issue. It's not that big of a deal. But in any case, all right, that's exactly the rebuild error. So we're going to be looking at this part and assembly, and I'm basically going to say like, okay, this part or anything like that is being changed to a different color perhaps. So in here, let's say appearance is color, I wanted to give it, a polished bronze or something for this. Oh, edit the appearance. Let's say I don't want it to be blue. So I'm just changing something very, very similar. That's okay. So I changed that from not being blue to being black like here. So it's affecting both in that regard. Awesome. So what I'm going to do is let me make sure that the actual part that I've edited is also checked out. So I can right click from the assembly. That's okay. All right, so this is the part in question. So I'm going to go ahead and check it out. I've made the change. Even if I made the change with it not being checked out, that's okay. So now that I made the change, I can do Control S and a Control Q. Perfect. And now I can go back to the top level assembly. Oh, let's actually just go here. That's fine. And I'll check everything back in because I made the change. I wanted to change the color of that particular component. So now I'm going to check everything back in. Perfect. I'll simply say made the color change. Check it back in. Of course, you would be a lot more specific and detailed with what's happening. But again, for expediency's sake, just simply showing this. Perfect. I've made the changes. Now from here or anything like that, I could just simply change the state right here if I wanted to. Or even in the where used tab, because if I go ahead and move this out a little bit more, here, the engineering change 06, I can quickly just change the state from that or send changes for approval. But I want to show you how it's looking like inside of File Explorer. So let me actually close out of SOLIDWORKS. Don't save. So the ECN is in progress, and I'll simply say, right click, change state, send my changes for approval. And I'll simply say, made the color change. Let me know if this looks good for you. And I'll notify Greenwald again, and I'll hit OK. Perfect. So we're taking into this account the files themselves, and oh, perfect. In any case, now what we're going to do, let's log out and log back in as C Greenwald or as admin, either or. So I'm going to log out as B Corbett, and for the final stretch of the ECR, or the ECN rather, because it's been approved, I'm going to right click, log in, MIP, and I'm just going to do it as admin. Perfect. Now, again, it's my turn to see, okay, the changes have been made. What does it look like? So I have here, the ECN is pending approval. If I go to the bill of materials, this was changed and it's currently at a Rev C when the change has been made. Perfect. I can look at the preview of the actual file, of course. So I can browse too. And let's look at the preview. Yeah, I think that looks a lot nicer, more professional. I like that. Perfect. So I'll say that, yeah, I think I like this. The change looked good. I know it's such a big change, right? We're going to go ahead and right click and change the state of the ECR form again. And I'll simply say changes approved. So now here's the fun part. What's going to happen is I'll say changes approved, and I'll hit OK. So a couple of things are going to happen. We're going to take a look at what the workflow looks like in a short minute. But the main thing is it's applying the new revision to the revision change of the CAD file itself. So we're going to see that very shortly. And the ECR form will remain in the ECR workflow stating that the engineering change has been completed. So we're going to go ahead and take a minute here. And I'm going to show you the backbone of how all this works. Perfect. So now with the miter saw assembly, if we look at the data card, it's been approved at revision D now. It's back to the approved state here. And if I go back to the where used and go back to ECR, the actual ECR form, and go to the data card, we'll see the full history of who the ECR was submitted by, when that happened, who the ECR was approved by, when that happened, and who approved the changes, basically who approved the ECN at the very end, and when that was approved by. And I can see all that information in terms of, okay, this assembly was what is actually being changed. Perfect. Let's actually go back here. So this is the workflow I was using. So basically what's happening here is this workflow is separate from the CAD workflow that I already use for my CAD files. This workflow is mainly for my virtual documents, AKA my ECR form, to then go and bring the CAD files along with it for the ride for the ECR approval. Now, it's a fairly simple workflow, but that doesn't mean it can't be scalable. Depending on how many levels of approvals you need or things of that nature, we can definitely do that. Currently in this regard, I only have one level of approval, but it can be furthermore, and you can have as many as you'd like. You're probably wondering, Rohan, why do you have two send for changes approvals, send changes for approvals? Goodness, I can't talk here. Why do you have two of the same transitions in between these two states? Well, firstly, the user who actually sends the changes for approval will only see one transition, but I have conditions on these transitions to modify the virtual document in one way and leave the CAD files being modified in a different way. That way I can track the changes properly and I can apply those separate implications or changes to either the virtual document or the assembly file. But to the user, to the end user, they won't know that they're none the wiser. It's just a single transition, but PDM's logic takes care of all of that in the background. And then lastly, we have when the ECN is approved or completed rather, the virtual document or the form for the ECR remains in the ECN completed stage or state. And I have this automatic transition that's conditionally applied to only send the CAD data back to the approved state in the CAD workflow such that it's not stuck in this ECR workflow itself. All right. So with the PDM engine change automation, you can see the changes are automatically tracked because the virtual document has its full history being applied there. The right people make the right changes at the right times because the state permissions allowed them to see that file at that given time. The approvals are automatically pushed to all reference documents. So again, as the file goes through that workflow, you can see it'll bring in those approvals as well. We saw the revision get pushed as well. We'll notify the right people at the right time. So again, this gets rid of the sneaker network or just saying, hey, emailing, hey, can you just notify this? That could take time. The notifications are happening automatically in the background and you're tracking them as they move through the workflow. And lastly, and probably the most importantly, combining all the data in one place. That's what the virtual document is doing for you. It's consolidating all those engineering changes and any other reference documentation that you need all in one place. So we've tracked those changes. And in here in the complete change management, we're seeing that you're tracking those changes as I showed you when I was opening it up in SOLIDWORKS. You can track it in real time, again, controlling who has the ability to do all of that and manage that documentation. If it's reference documentation like specifications or Word documents or anything like that, compile it all into one time. That's the main takeaways that I want from this. I hope this was insightful. I hope you guys learned a lot. And thank you so much for joining me. I know we have a couple minutes left, so I'd like to address some questions here. So let me go ahead and stop sharing and let's take a look. All right. So Steve Lappick, you made a question of because you checked everything out to make a color change with the one component, will the comment show up in the history of all components, just the one component, or in the assembly? So the comment that was changed or whatever I had checked out, that comment will be there in the history of that file. So because I checked out not only the assembly and the component itself, when I checked it out and made that change and applied that comment, whatever was being checked back in will now inherit that comment. Does that help answer your question, Steve? All right, while I'm waiting for Steve to answer, is there a way to automate the paste as reference? That's a fantastic question. Without API, not necessarily. The paste as reference is meant to be sort of a very flexible mechanic that you can use with PDM. Yes, through the use of an API and scripting, you could automate that, but that's not necessarily out of the box. Out of the box, it's basically user input that applies the paste as reference there. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Like, hey, I didn't know Rohan looked like that. Anything from there? Cool. All right, well, this presentation is recorded. And of course, I believe you might be sending it out. Oh, sorry. I thought it was great. So is the info from the ECO exportable? Oh, so like the actual card, or do you mean like the bill of materials? What exactly would you want as exportable? The card information. So the card information itself, there is a solution. There's a knowledge-based solution to be able to export it out as like an Excel file, so to speak. But what I'd rather you do is we could actually create a report through the report generator to see what the ECR was actually about. And you can have like a view or a search result that tells you all about the ECR. So that's probably something I would recommend in that regard. We have another one. Are we able to add PowerPoint to virtual ECR? Yes, absolutely. Yep, Kevin Klein, you can absolutely, like any Microsoft Office document, so pretty much any document you can put inside PDM, you can attach as reference to a virtual document, absolutely. Is the ECR function part of 2021 or 2022? Oh, this functionality has been available for quite some time. This is just my way. The new workflow changes that I've showed you, like the new icons, that's been available in 2021 and 2020. But honestly, if you're running, PDM 2019, 2020, 2021, you should have the ability to do pretty much everything I just showed you. How far in the history of the file can I go back, and can I use one of the revisions as a separate work? Yeah, absolutely. You can basically the history of a file. So what I can do is I can quickly show you. We have just a couple more minutes here. The history of a file. If we go back here, so like if I were to go to this miter saw assembly and right-click the assembly and go to history, the history goes back since it was created. So it goes all the way back to when I created this assembly. So PDM will always track the history of any of its files since its inception. That'll always be the case. All right. Does that help address all the questions I talked about there? Anything else standing out?
Rohan, this was really great. And in case some people don't know, I am Kelly Fultman from Design Point. Rohan will be in a trade show booth this afternoon. So if you have additional questions, you are welcome to reach out to him at that time. Or certainly at any point in time, you can call into support or call the main number at Design Point, and we can certainly get you in touch with Rohan.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Rohan. This was really insightful, and we are very fortunate to have you as part of our team. So we're going to stop this recording.
I'll stop at you.
We're gonna stop this recording and see you all at the rest of the event.
Sounds good. Absolutely. Oh, Jay Khan, I'm so sorry. You asked the second part of the question. Can you use one of the revisions as separate work? Yes, there's some in PDM Professional. You can use something called branching, where you can take a revision and just do like a separate file and branch it and then merge it at the same time. That is possible. Sorry, wanted to make sure you got that. All right, everyone, have a great time at the rest of MIP, and I look forward to talking to you guys at the trade show booth.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, take care, everybody.